One of the biggest challenges with the Steam Deck right now is trying to figure out what games work and what games don't, and what games you want to play. There are so many games on Steam. The Steam store can be completely overwhelming. So I brought a friend along with me today, and we're going to give you some recommendations of 6, dare I say, hidden gems, games that maybe you don't know about or didn't know worked on the Steam Deck. Let's get into it. The Steam Deck is rapidly becoming one of my favorite gaming devices. I absolutely love this thing. I'd like to welcome my friend YourPlayer2 to the channel to give his first recommendation on the first game that we think is going to run great on your Steam Deck.
Alright, so first off, huge thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I'm not going to waste any time. I'm just going to dive right into my first pick for a game that is a bit of a hidden gem, but one that I think is particularly good on the Steam Deck, and that would be Gone Home. Now, the premise for Gone Home is that you're just returning home from Europe in 1995 on June 7th, I think, and whenever you get there, you find that your house is completely empty and your family is nowhere to be found. Now, I realize that sounds like a pretty dire premise, but I assure you, despite the fact that this game flirts with the horror genre, it is definitely not a horror game. What it is a game more akin to a walking simulator, depending on how you feel about that, where really the object of the game is to explore this house and ultimately unravel a very human mystery. Most of the game's narrative is doled out through environmental storytelling and some light puzzle solving. And, crucially, you will never encounter another character while you play through Gone Home. However, you will learn very much about the different characters in its universe, despite the fact that you'll never see them, which I think is really interesting. And the reason I think this is particularly well lent to the deck is the fact that it is a really cozy game, right, which I think really works well for portable experiences. You're just sort of exploring this house, trying to unravel the mystery of where everybody is, and it's just kind of a relaxing experience, and not an overly long game, I'll point out, either. It is only about 2 to 3 hours long, and if you speedrun it, you can actually complete it even sooner, but I wouldn't recommend that you do that because you would really just rob yourself of what is inherently a really good story in Gone Home. And for me, really the icing on the cake is that 90s setting, right? If you're somebody who had all grew up in the 90s like I did, then you will find tons of nostalgia to keep you entertained throughout a very heartwarming, very human story that is in Gone Home.
It's my first game here that I consider to be a hidden gem, a game that nobody really talks about that is absolutely fantastic, and that is Farm Together. If you have played farming games in the past, particularly if you have played games on Facebook like Farmville or Tayonga the Island Farm or Klondike or any of those Farmville clones, you would understand that there's a certain sensibility to those games, primarily around the in-game clock. Games on consoles like Harvest Moon, they tend to run on an in-game clock, which means that you need to be in the game and playing the game for a set amount of time in order for progression to happen. In order for your crops to grow, in order for your animals to be ready to harvest, you have to be actually playing the game. And that really slows things down. If you come from the era in the early 2010s and stuff of playing Farmville, you're used to this idea of planting something, walking away, and coming back in 2 hours or 4 hours or whatever, and your crops are ready to grow. Well, that is what you get in Farm Together. This game feels very familiar if you're used to games like Farmville and other fast-paced games like that, but it is completely a free-to-play game. There are no microtransactions. It feels like a game that should have microtransactions, but yeah, the fantastic thing about this game is it's fast-paced and it's laser-focused on the farming. You make money by growing crops and harvesting them and expanding your farm and growing more crops and harvesting those and getting animals and trees, and there's so many customization options. You build a house and you can furnish it and put fences all over the place and little buildings. Every building that you build adds to the stats of the farm. You get more storage or the ability to sell a certain item that you have to craft or whatever, and it's just absolutely fantastic. The graphics are great. The performance is pretty darn good. The game looks gorgeous. It runs at 60 frames a second, although there are the occasional stutter as your farm starts to get really big and populated. It does start to stutter a little bit here and there, but it's not in any way game breaking. You can use that new Steam Deck 40 hertz update that we got recently to tone the game down to 40 hertz, and it runs absolutely perfectly. I still choose to go to the 60 frames because it does run very well at 60 frames most of the time. Anyway, let's move on to our next selection.
Now, continuing on with my theme of 90s nostalgia, my next pick is Horizon Chase Turbo. Now, Horizon Chase Turbo is an arcade-style racer with a distinctly synthwave sort of flair about it. However, when I say it's an arcade-style racer, I don't mean like a more modern Need for Speed or something like that, but rather this would be more of a throwback to 90s era arcade racers in the vein of, say, Outrun or, the Cruisin' series. And it has a really wide array of cars and locales and tracks that you can unlock, so one of the things that I like most about it is that there is a constant sense of progression. So even though it does have some more arcade sensibilities, it still does give you kind of a modern way of feeling more accomplished as you make your way through, because it feels like you're constantly getting rewarded for your efforts. But I think Horizon's really well suited to the Steam Deck, not just because it performs great there, which it totally does, but rather because, again, racing games really just do well in the portable format, right? If you're looking for just a quick pick up and play experience where you want to jump in, do a few races without getting locked into like a really long circuit or something like that, Horizon Chase Turbo is great for that. It has style for days, it's approachable enough that just about anybody can pick it up and have a great time with it, and again, thanks to the drop-in, drop-out nature of portable play on the Steam Deck, I think it's a really good choice.
Okay, so the next game I have here is a game that I've absolutely fallen in love with, and again, you really don't hear anyone talking about this game. It's an indie game called Hunt Down. Absolutely love this game. If you love run and gun games, the likes of Contra or Metal Slug, and you like beat 'em up games, the likes of Streets of Rage, things like that, this game combines those types of gameplay with melee and a lot of gunplay and gives you this really cool cyberpunk sort of aesthetic where you play a level, it's level based, you go through a level, you fight, smaller enemies, and then you get to a boss, and the game is really all about the boss fights. Every boss fight is completely unique. You've got to learn their patterns, you've got to figure out how the only really one way to beat that boss is, and it's something where you're gonna die and die and die until you figure out those patterns, and it's absolutely fantastic. I can't speak highly enough of this game. If you like that retro aesthetic, if you like living in a world that reminds you of RoboCop or Terminator or something, Blade Runner sort of aesthetic, absolutely a gem that must not be missed. This is an indie game that you can pick up at regular price for maybe $20 or so, and it does go on sale frequently, so keep your eyes, put it in your wish list, keep your eyes open for this game, because if you like retro stuff, you should not miss this game. It is excellent.
Alright, my final selection for the Steam Deck is kind of a new game that I've been playing lately but having a lot of fun with, and that is Party Hard. Now, if Horizon Chase Turbo had a light dusting of a synthwave aesthetic, Party Hard is absolutely drowning in it. So if you're somebody like me who likes a chunky pixel aesthetic and some slick tunes, or maybe you're just looking to, kind of scratch that post-Hotline Miami itch, Party Hard is probably a game you should look into. You play as an unnamed man who really just wants some peace and quiet, so naturally your next step is to start killing every partygoer at the party that's keeping you up next door. And really the goal is to take out every single one of the partygoers without getting killed yourself or getting arrested because somebody spots a dead body and calls the police on you. Now that's definitely a dark premise, but I will say that the deviousness of it all is somewhat undercut by the punchy, cartoonish kind of graphics. It feels more like you're playing something like Broforce than a legitimate slasher, plus the gameplay is really not that gory or anything like that. It's more that you're playing like a puzzle sort of game of cat and mouse with the character. So yeah, if you're worried about being just over the top, ultra violence, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. And the reason I think this plays really well on the deck is because it's a game where you really want to keep a bird's eye view of everything that's happening with all the different partygoers, so nobody accidentally stumbles upon you performing a murder or anything like that. And the ability to have like a smaller screen to really keep track of everything, I think makes this play a little bit better than it does on like a giant 65-inch screen, for example. Unquestionably the darkest of my picks, but ultimately it's still worth a look. And that's it. Those are my 3 picks for some lesser known, maybe underappreciated gems that you could play on the Steam Deck. Thanks again for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
Okay, and for my last game, I call this a hidden gem because I've literally never heard anyone talk about this. This is a game that was on the Xbox 360 and I believe the PS3 years ago. I can't think it came out in 2011 or 2012, and that is Capcom's Remember Me. This game is absolutely fantastic. The graphics look great on the deck. This does not look like a 10-year-old game. I don't know if they've upscaled it for the PC version or what the deal is, but the game looks fantastic. And from being from Capcom, it has a lot of elements of Resident Evil in the storytelling. You've got some horror themes, but it's more of a sci-fi horror theme. The traversal system, getting around in the game, feels a lot like the first Uncharted or maybe an earlier Assassin's Creed game where you're running around, wall jumping, wall running, climbing, all kinds of climbing, tons of verticality in this game. The combat is action combat that levels up, and they add all kinds of new combos and stuff. It's, you know, you could call it a button masher, but it is a combo heavy button masher. Really cool game that I've never heard anyone talk about, and it is so much fun. I'm about halfway through the game now, and I absolutely love it. Thanks so much to my friend YourPlayer2. Please check out his channel. He puts up all kinds of great Steam Deck content and all kinds of content about handheld gaming in general. We both share that. We both love handheld gaming. I'm all about the Steam Deck, the Switch, the 3DS, the PSP. I absolutely love these systems, and I absolutely love what the Steam Deck brings to the table, being able to play a lot of these handheld games from other systems all in one place. So check out his channel for regular Steam Deck content. And don't forget to subscribe here at NerdCrave as well, because we've got all kinds of Steam Deck content and Switch content and PS5 content and so much more planned every single week. Thanks so much for your support. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Stay classy.